Welcome to Public Comment. I'm John Dunbar, former mayor of Yountville.
And I'm Alfredo Petros, a former Napa County supervisor.
And I'm Peter Rumble. I have the pleasure of serving as the CEO of the Napa County Farm Bureau.
Thank you for joining us as we talk about politics, people, and whatever else Peter wants to.
They don't want the facts. They've already made up their mind.
Communities, if they're not growing, they're done.
Repetition is making people believe things, whether they're right or wrong.
The fundamental misunderstanding of the value of agriculture in Napa Valley.
Alfredo, I'm really excited that we have Peter Rumble with us today to talk about not only Napa County Farm Bureau, but agriculture in general here in the Napa Valley and really whatever else that you would like to talk about. Let's just start off quickly with a kind of a general introduction. I know you're still in your honeymoon phase,
The honeymoon's over.
Of the job. It's almost a year now, right?
Or
not quite.
Not even close, yeah.
But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks. We're about at the 6-month mark now. Okay. Yeah. Listen, new to Napa County, right? I moved over here in September. Spent a lot of the last 10 plus years, longer than that, 15 years or so, over in Santa Rosa. Did a lot of work for county government over there, and also ran the Santa Rosa Metro Chamber of Commerce for about 7 years.
Peter, how was it going from a Chamber of Commerce guy to being a farmer, being part of the Farm Bureau? So that's a big change from a suit and tie maybe to jeans.
Yeah.
Which I can relate to.
Yeah, listen, I appreciate the transition for sure. No suit and tie. The transition's been pretty good. Definitely a learning curve for me, right? The fundamentals are the same, truly, right? We're advocating for a member, be it a restaurant, a bank, or a farmer, right? We're trying to understand their issues the best we can and making sure that they have a voice, making sure that they have a seat at the table. Such a critical thing, particularly in these times, not just Napa County, but overall. Ag is going through, particularly Napa ag, as we think about grapes and wine, going through a hell of a storm right now. And every little bit helps, right? So we're trying to be the strong voice that they need.
Do you think that some of you, because you also had some city of Santa Rosa influence beyond just the Chamber of Commerce, right? As in planning for a period of time, you have different perspectives that you're bringing together.
Yep.
And you mentioned that there was a transition, but you've really fit into it. And as far as I could tell, it was pretty seamless. That you were ready to go.
Thank you.
But how have you seen not only the industry shift for you, but some of the similarities and differences between Sonoma County and Napa County?
Yeah.
Now that you are looking at it from a different lens.
Yeah. Well, one's better than the other's pretty clear.
No doubt. But if we could steal good ideas.
Well, I'll tell everybody who wants to listen, including my friends back in Sonoma County, I haven't had a bad bottle of wine in Napa yet. I've had a few of them.
I think we need to toast to that. We're drinking Napa wine right here.
Well done.
Cheers to that.
Cheers. It's all because of the farmers.
That's right. It starts there.
It all starts with the farmer. Yeah, that perspective I think is really valuable, particularly when we start talking about advocacy. And not just advocacy at the political level, right? But understanding how the machinery works, how the bureaucracy works. I'll tell the story a lot where before I was in private sector, ever did a stint in private sector, I always thought of myself as a business-friendly government guy. And man, I was not. I tell you that right out of the gate. I was not. I saw my job. Oh, well, if I can make a slight, 1% improvement in this report, I'm really doing my job. Meanwhile, that project got held up by a couple months so I could change a sentence. That's not business friendly at all. So I never understood that until I was running a business responsible for payroll, trying to contract with cities throughout California to advance clean energy. And, we'll handle it in a couple months. And I said, well, I don't. All right. I guess I'm not paying myself this month, and I'm going to pay everybody else, right? So, understanding both sides of that equation, I think, is really important, and not just understanding kind of the motivations of it, but understanding how to move the machinery, and where to push and what thing that you can push, right? I'm not going to go to a planner with a policy decision, right?
Smart.
But there are some things that you could do at a staff level and have some discretion and move some things. And at the very least, right, that person, and if we're in a planning context, that planner understands the business, understands the context, understands the pressures. They're not just looking at it in a vacuum, right? And that is so helpful.
So, Peter, you're relatively new. Still, I joke that the honeymoon's over, but I think it's refreshing to come in with a new set of eyes. So you came in, you wanted this job, you knew Napa was special.
Yeah.
What's your assessment of it now? Because there are some things that are broken.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But now that you've been here, what's your take on it?
Yeah. Well, certainly I still think this place is special. This place is beautiful. The history here is amazing and beautiful and special, and really unique, right? And worth saving, worth protecting, and making sure that, generations to come, can recognize how special it is. So that certainly is still there. There's, one of the biggest things from, fresh eyes outside looking in that I see is a fundamental misunderstanding of the value of agriculture in Napa Valley.
From who though?
I think that there's a lot of pushback on the environmental side, frankly. And I'm working to learn.
And I'm not trying to define. No. I just want to make sure people understand.
That's fine. No. But I think it goes beyond sort of environmental camp, right? I think it's the general public as well.
That's important, right? There.
Yeah, it absolutely is important. And it's not to say that they don't have a perspective to bring to the table. And it's not to say that I don't want to hear it, because I do, right? And I want to reach out and understand where they're coming from. And, maybe I'm full of shit. Maybe I'm wrong, So let's have that conversation and find out. But listen, as I'm having to learn about Napa, right? I don't have the sort of shared history. I know for a fact the ag preserve and agriculture was the bulwark for the environmental movement in Napa. So to now have the environmentalists say agriculture is sort of an environmental degradation, that just it just has no logical basis, right? And is the antithesis to the entire environmental movement here in Napa, right? So that's something that I think is broken, and I think is shared on both sides, right? Because again, I think we need to tell our story even better. I know, just as a fact, one, I'll share a benefit to the members, and then a benefit to the environment for something that we do at the Farm Bureau, our Region 2 water monitoring and compliance program, which is a insanely bureaucratic name for we stand in the middle of the state water board and the farmer, right? And we do this in Napa, and Sonoma Farm Bureau does it in Sonoma. So we aggregate information, we coordinate site visits, we handle all of the reporting collectively, and our members pay a reduced fee, right, for that. So the benefit to the member, we saved just last year, we saved our members nearly $500,000.
It's real money.
That's real money.
Yeah.
Collectively, it's not every farmer saving, right? But collectively, that's a hell of a lot of money, right? Particularly
in the
time that we're in right now. On the other side of this, we know, because we do the site visits, and we do it in partnership with RCD, right? So it's non-biased, science-based. We know that this program has improved water quality. Improved, not maintained, not, we're keeping our degradation down and to a minimum. Improved water quality. We recent story, we're seeing fish now in the upper reaches of Puda, right? That's because of this work. So again, to say that agriculture isn't contributing to the environmental solution.
To that point, I don't want to interrupt, but you said something that I haven't heard many people say, though, Peter, from an industry group. You have to tell your fucking story.
We got to tell our story.
We spend a lot of time, and we have, at least I have, bashing the criticism.
Yeah.
Because I think it's clear, it's one-dimensional. Their agenda is to stop it. And quite honestly, some, and I would say even the same majority, they don't want the facts. They've already made up their mind.
Yeah.
My opinion only. But when there's no other narrative, there's no other story, they fucking win.
Yeah.
because they frame you as, well, you must just want to rape and pillage the land.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they don't know what you just said and did is real.
Mhm.
Like, it's not nebulous.
Yeah.
It's a real outcome.
Yeah.
So why is that not happening? Again, you're not bound by any of the previous groups.
Mhm.
You're new,
Mhm.
right? So how do we pivot to, hey, here's a real story with a real outcome, unbiased?
Mhm.
That to the general public of what you said, not
Yeah.
just the environmental camp, but the general public that's on the fence, maybe.
Yeah.
They need to be told that too.
Yeah.
So what's going to change now, though, Peter, to be able to get that message across more?
Well, we got to collect all the facts, right? And we got to get to the point where you're right. The pushback has always been, "Oh, you're wrong. I don't want to hear it. That's BS," or whatever the story was, and then just walking away and going back to my own property and doing what I'm doing, right? I don't think it was ever identified as a need before. I think advocacy meant to a lot of folks, when an issue comes up, we're going to stand up and be pissed off and yell, and then we're done. We did our work as advocates. To me, that's not enough. That's not enough. And frankly, without telling that story, your position is weakened when you stand up and yell. I just don't ever think it was prioritized. And I'll tell you, just through the recruiting process of, seeing if this opportunity was, if I was the right person for this opportunity, right? And trying to educate myself, I couldn't find this information out there. I can find the value, I can find the crop report.
Yeah.
I can find, some awards for best practices, right? But I can't find that entire story. So fresh eyes coming in, right? I see that as a big need. How is anybody going to know? How are we going to get our point across if we don't open our mouths and say it?
Well, one of the challenges, though, of even having that communication improve is the way so many in the public just don't trust. Oh, your industry, you have to say that. You're making up the facts.
Yep.
How do you convince people that are now built into deny and kind of disagree with the facts? I mean, is it about repetition? Because it seems like repetition is making people believe things, whether they're right or wrong.
Yeah.
But do you have a sense of that yet? Just standing up and talking and then going back, like we've kind of poked fun at folks that are going to town halls or rallies and holding up their signs and then going back and said, I did my part.
Right.
So what dynamics do you see that need to change to really start having lasting influence?
Yeah. Or posting something online and feeling.
Don't bring up nextdoor.com, please don't, because then I get all fired
up. That's a good question.
No, it's a really good question. I think repetition is a piece of it. Sure. There are a few things at play. I think another point is, if I write a report and it's coming from me, I recognize that doesn't have a lot of credibility, right? So bringing in experts to do that study. So the RCD, right? They're doing the scientific review of water quality, right? That's not me. That's independent science at work, right? We just are launching a project now on regulation, right? And the cost of regulation on farmers. I heard all the time coming in, well, we're the most regulated industry, most regulated in the state. Nobody's regulated except for us. Listen, I've got a hard time believing that, right? Well, okay, if you say so, right? But I'm on your side, so I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, but I don't know that, right? So we're going to work with Cal Poly to do a study, again, research, academic institution. They did similar work for Monterey Farm Bureau that showed, cost of lettuce for them, right? Stayed relatively the same over the last 20 years. Cost of regulation has gone up by something like 700%. So try to stay in business when your cost of regulation is going up by that much, but you can't sell your product for anymore, right? I suspect that we're going to see something similar here. But, I'll hold out judgment until we get the report. So bringing in, some expertise to bolster your argument. And the third is going back to something I said earlier. I really need to approach this conversation as a conversation. I need to tell the story in context. I need to understand where other folks are coming from. Is it because they don't have the facts? Is it because they're locked into their own kind of theory? Is it because they have other facts that they are holding on to? And we need to have a conversation about that. And I need to be humble enough to know that, the picture is a little bit more complex than my point of view, right? So I think taking all of those things together is how you get to persuasion, and and recognize that 100% of people aren't going to agree 100% of the time.
Well, we learned that when we were politicians. But quick follow-up question: what role does the California Farm Bureau play in this kind of either research, fact finding, and then ultimately the advocacy and the communications?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think it's a separator of the Farm Bureau from other industry groups, frankly. Not to say better, worse, or anything like that, right? But it's something that makes the Farm Bureau unique. So every dollar of dues that you're paying Napa County Farm Bureau, there's a piece of that goes to the State Farm Bureau, all right? And so you're a member of the State Farm Bureau as much as you are a member of Napa County Farm Bureau. What that buys you is a team of advocates in Sacramento working with the California legislature, but also sending teams to Washington, D.C. on federal issues. What you're getting is a team of legal experts on water rights, on the right to farm, on any number of issues that touch agriculture. Those attorneys are available whenever I call, right? So if somebody's having an issue that touches on kind of, the law or regulation, I can pick up a phone and say, I got this person, what advice? Doesn't mean they're going to represent them in court, right? But it does mean that we've got that well of expertise. They also have a communications team, right? And they're pumping out information all of the time, right? So all of those things are distinct benefits to Farm Bureau members.
So let me ask you a question, going back to what you said, Peter. The whole validator angle, I think that's so critical, right? So as you talk about whether it's Cal Poly or RCD, do you still look forward and see a path, right, where you can bring people together?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's something that you're uniquely qualified for because you are new. And part of being new is having an opportunity to say, hey, I wasn't here.
Yep.
Not my bed.
Yep.
Right. But I do think people want harmony. I do think people want peace. But right now there's a little unclarity. There's fog of how the hell do we get there?
Yeah.
So what's been your assessment? You've been here now, you've talked to groups, you've probably had the benefit of talking to some of our good friends on the environmental camp. Do you still have hope that you can bring it together?
I do. Yeah, I do have a lot of hope. The path forward for me, right, is to approach all of these conversations with a healthy dose of humility, right? And with a complete focus on what are our shared goals, right? So we all want a healthy environment, right? We all want agriculture.
What do you do? So like I'm check on the first one, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think there might be a fork in the road on some that don't, right? And I think that's where that's going to be the deciding factor, right? Potentially. I'm not going to say general plan, but now I have to say it. Gosh, we drink every time there's a general plan. Right. But there's this upcoming general plan, right, that might create a fork in the road, right? So what do you do at that point? Because that's when the honeymoon is over as a collective industry, right?
Yeah.
So how do you foresee the Farm Bureau playing a role in that space?
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, it's not all just platitudes.
I know. I like the hope.
Yeah.
I hold out hope too.
I think there's some concentric rings here, right? As we go into the general plan, the first is our industry, right? And we need to be speaking with the same voice and not letting little disagreements kind of derail a common voice, and not let history fragment us, right? So I'm committed to that. That's just frankly, that's about personality.
But I would, but to not to interrupt you, but I think that is so important though, because as someone that was up there, when there is no unification, it's permission to kind of conquer, and divide and conquer, right? How you say it. But I think spending some time to understand your colleagues, right, your peer groups, and figure out where there was, that Venn diagram, where the intersection lies. It's a hard fucking job. Yeah. Especially right now. Yeah. But I think if you're on that path, I think that's a right path.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard, but that's if I've found success in my career, and, it's debatable. But if I have, it's through that approach, right? We are, truly stronger together. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's true. It's a cliche for a reason. Yeah. And so, I'm completely dedicated to that. And again, we're going to have a difference of opinion from time to time, right? But the message that we need to put forward is one of unity and common purpose. So that's the first, concentric ring that I would say. The next is other stakeholders, and it includes environment, it includes transportation folks, it includes housing folks. All of these groups, I can draw a clear line between their interests and a strong agricultural sector, right? So that's on me. And I'm not just representing wineries or grape growers. I'm representing all of the agricultural industry, right? So I can absolutely, you want to talk housing? I'll talk housing all damn day, right? And I know exactly where it belongs. And I know exactly the kind of housing that we need, and I know exactly why we need it. And I will guarantee you that every YIMBY in this state would line up to support me, right? Yeah. On those thoughts. On the environmental side, man, it's just so important. Going back to John, what you're talking about before, is making sure that at least they understand. Now, if they're going to disagree, they're going to disagree, right? And I just got to keep on trying through that. But at least they understand how I can draw that connection. And by God, again, agriculture exists in this county as a environmental bulwark against sprawl. That's why it's here. Some of the
and it's working.
And some of the farmers and their descendants who created the agricultural preserve are the original environmentalists of Napa Valley, right? So, I mean, for God's sake, can we fucking honor that and recognize that, and not all of a sudden, make black white and look at the industry now and say, oh, that's bad for the environment? It just blows my mind. So just gotta continue to work on that conversation.
Well, we've brought up on many occasions how we try to find solutions in our conversations, and you've just addressed some. One is really kind of reminding people of the historical foundation of this valley. Yeah. We also have challenged some of the folks with different agendas. What is your vision for the future of Napa Valley? If you say it's so bad now, what do you want instead?
Yeah. Well, I say there's 400 other cities they can move to, John, too, right?
Yeah, so, 482 other cities. But there's not really an answer to that question when you challenge, okay, what would you prefer in 20 years this valley look like? Yeah. And what would you want to have here? And so you really are the kind of the keeper of the cornerstone of the valley. It's a lot of pressure that you sustain agriculture in an agricultural valley. Yeah. and it's being challenged more than ever.
Yeah.
Probably since the ag preserve was created. We hear the stories in the 68 of families fighting against families because there was disagreement.
Yeah, there absolutely was.
On property rights versus sustainability and everything in between. What is your vision that I get it, you're still probably forming that vision, maybe that's the 10, 20-year plan, but do you have some thoughts on how, not only what you would like us to envision in 20 years as a valley, but how to get there?
Yeah. I'll get into that answer with two quick comments on your question. One is I have the privilege of serving on the Napa Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, right? And we heard a project, I don't know, a month or two ago come forward. And we also heard from the neighbors who didn't want that project, right? And it was a undeveloped piece of land that could really only be developed for one thing. And, the neighbors said, well, we like to see the turkeys on that land, so we don't want to see any development, right? That blows my mind.
And that was in the city limits also.
It was in the city limits.
It was next to the river, but still
in the city limits. And I guess what I'm saying is, to your point about lack of vision of what the future is, right? Communities, just like organisms, if they're not growing, even by a small amount, they're dying, And so if we say absolutely no growth, absolutely no development, what you are choosing is slow death for your community. Just straight up fact. The other thing that I'll say is, going back to where we started this conversation around me being new, Jesus Christ, the beauty of this place is phenomenal, unparalleled. I've been to Europe. I've traveled some. It is incredible here. And so when I hear somebody say, "Oh, well, it's not like it used to be," or all this, all these vines and all these people hate it, right? You have got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. I grew up on a shipyard. You want to talk about ugly? You want to talk about run down, vacant storefronts? Or do you want to talk about, beautiful vineyards and a thriving economy? Get out of here with that stuff, right? So just two 2 points on your question. My vision is we can do two things. One is actually expand agriculture in Napa Valley, do it in a smart way, but in a way that allows small farmers, family farmers to maintain their property and have the next generation come in and start their own farms. I would like to see that. And that's not to say that larger companies are bad or anything like that, right? I just want to see opportunity for both. The other is I want to see nice, healthy development infill within our cities. And I want to see our farm workers have a chance to live in our cities. I want to see our school teachers have a chance to live in our cities. And I want to see apartments go up rather than spread out and push against our city limits and threaten the vision of an expanded agriculture. I think both of those things are possible. I think it takes folks like me, like you, to say that they're possible. And I think it takes elected officials to have the guts to recognize that they represent everybody, not just the 10 people who come into chambers and shout.
Well, we've called out many times about the very controlled and frankly underdeveloped nature of the valley. Just under 10% of total property has actually been developed to support the wine industry with vineyards. And that is agriculture. Now, some people feel like you should not ever cut down a tree, but then they want healthy forests. And we do have an elevated wildfire risk being in such a natural environment. How does all that play into your ability to either potentially have controlled and appropriate growth, but also wildfire protection and environmental protection, habitat protection, all those elements that do play into a lot of the properties that you and your members represent.
Yeah, it's a great question. The first point is, if we focus growth within city limits rather than push into the wildland interface, right? That is step one. The next thing that I'd say is, I know I was partly responsible for Sonoma County's response to the 2017 fires, right? I was in the EOC. I was watching the fire spread as it did. And I know that ag lands presented a natural fire break. And actually, our vineyards and ag land stopped us from losing more houses than we could have. Stopped the fire from running up 12 and into downtown Santa Rosa. Nothing's classified, right? I was on a call. Common sense. I was on a call, and we were talking about the potential of evacuating downtown Santa Rosa, right? Because it looked like it was running and it was stopped, right? So ag land is not a wildfire risk. It's a benefit to wildfire mitigation, right? So long as we're able to properly maintain that space. So I think that is a critical factor as well.
I love how you're expanding the ecosystem of your outreach and stakeholders and partners, right? Historically, Farm Bureau, not that it was one dimensional, but it was like, we're here to advocate for farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think for the moment of today and the challenges of today, you need a team. You need a coalition, which it sounds like you're building. But one of the things that I'm intrigued by is, for a farmer and a grower to be successful, you need a partner and a vintner.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's selling their wine.
Yeah. And you need a consumer on the other end.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
that's my job.
you just validated that chain, right?
Yeah.
And for the first time, I've seen this purposeful advocacy from the Farm Bureau of saying, we're tethered together, folks.
Yeah.
Is that purposeful? And are your members fully behind that? Because I think that's exciting right now.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they're starting to realize it more and more, and some are, further along in that journey. But yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's the direction. And let me just expand that ecosystem a little bit, right? Because it's not just, grape to vintner and to consumer. That is our restaurants, right?
Your banks, your lenders, right?
Our banks, our architects, our landscape engineers, our folks who our tourism, economy, that ecosystem that starts with the vine and the grape is far more broad reaching than I think anybody's given credit to.
And I think that's the narrative change that I think I see the Farm Bureau putting forward. That's exciting. And I go back to what you said from when you started. It's people.
Mm-hmm.
It's the community at large that needs to hear the story.
Yeah.
Right. So I just want to commend you and your board for leaning into it, for stepping into it. There's always an excuse for not to do something.
Yeah, of course.
And you're not using that as an excuse. Clearly, we've been at it for 30 minutes and you laid out some real shit of how you find peace, how you find progress. And that's not just lip service, because I can hear you back it up. Like, you have a partnership with Cal Poly.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
That's going to create something.
Yeah.
Right. You're reaching out to other groups, not just in a roundtable setting, but it's saying, what's the purpose? Because I heard about that meeting with the thing that's not going to happen anymore because a bunch of neighbors showed up, which is crazy.
Crazy.
And you asked some tough questions of like, well, what do you want? Like, why? We need that.
Yeah.
Right. So I just want to commend you for that, because it's what Napa needs.
I appreciate it.
Well, and the last thing I'll add to that is the human component of not just farming and farmers, but all those different connections you were talking about, the integration of everything. And this does support our public education. It does support every level of our economic development and sustainability. Yeah. It's environmental and economic sustainability. And we are all in on agriculture and the wine industry, and that's a great place to be.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen on its own, which we're seeing now that it was almost effortless once it was established, maybe 20, 30 years ago, to oversimplify it. Now it's even harder than ever, probably because of all the global pressures on things. So I commend you for tackling the pretty significant responsibilities that you have and really kind of invigorating, I think, the energy people are bringing forward. And it does have to happen collectively so that it is as loud a voice and targeted a mission as possible.
Give me 30 seconds on the people side of things, because I want to say two things. One is on the public services, right? Let's just, for the sake of argument, say a vineyard in production is $300,000 an acre, right? That's just whatever. We can up, down, whatever. That produces a certain amount of property tax that funds our fire services, going back to fire mitigation, funds our schools, funds our parks, funds our roads, funds our police. Every service that you want as a resident here is getting the highest amount of funding for that service from a productive vineyard, right? Go ahead, take that out of production. You think that's better for the community? Go ahead, take it out of production. What do you get when it's out of production? You get $0. How many cops are you willing to give up? How many teachers do you want to let go out of your schools, right? How many parks do you want to run into disrepair, right? That's a serious question.
Well, and
and the other thing, the final thing that I'll say about people is, it's not the Farm Bureau. We're not just about the vine and the fruit, right? Really happy to say that we're launching a partnership with the St. Helena Health Foundation for members of the Farm Bureau to have on-site health screenings for every one of their workers, to get vaccination, cancer screenings, tests on the employer site, so that person doesn't have to figure out as they're commuting to Vallejo or wherever to get home to work in their health services.
You're on a roll, man.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And the one thing I'll say is, I think you just painted a picture that is real. It's not a threat. It's a fact.
It's a fact.
And I think that's how we have to present things, right? So I appreciate you talking, in that tone, right? And what's reflecting on me is we have a tendency to tear things down and then rebuild. What I hear you say, Peter, is you build from. You build from this block of ag that everyone has benefited. The tourism has done their own part. They've earned it on their own, but it's built off this pillar of ag. Restaurants and housing, same thing.
You get grapes on the county seal, my man.
Yeah, and so that's right. What is so damn exciting. And there is hope.
Yeah.
I actually see it now. I'm feeling it. So
it's worth one last toast.
That's all I got left.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Alfredo, what did you think of our conversation with Peter Rumble?
Look, John, I felt really good about it, man. And I asked him this softball question, rainbows and unicorns, like, is there hope? And I knew it when I was asking, but now that we're here on the porch in our happy place, I feel good about it. Like, I actually believe there is a path forward for those that want to. And we're not gonna wait around for those that don't wanna be on the bus. We're gonna leave them at the bus stop. But I suspect the majority of the people are gonna wanna go forward, because Napa is worth fighting for, and the future's fucking exciting.
Yeah, he's still in his first year, but he brings such a great perspective on what's important, what's of value to Napa Valley. I love his initial outreach and communication, not just with his members in the Farm Bureau, but well beyond that. I think it's that kind of dynamic personality. It's really going to benefit us.
Well, you're right. There's him, the dynamic leader, right? But it's also the organization, the Farm Bureau, and his board backs him, right? Of acknowledging so much is tethered to agriculture, whether you're a bank doing loans for ag, or whether you're a restaurant providing food for ag, for their clients, for their customers, for their, the businesses. It's this vision that's centered and grounded on ag, which is kind of like how it was back in the day, but it's modernized for today. And that, I think that's personally exciting for me. And I think for the first time in a while, you have the right people at the right time at the right place.
I also think a perspective is being, former electeds, we need people like Peter to trust he knows what he's talking about. And sometimes we politicians think we know better than the industry leaders and the experts. And I know we've talked about how we're not in office anymore.
In some cases we did, just to be clear.
But I do think that he brings such a smart perspective on how to sustain not only farming and agriculture, but this whole valley.
Well, if I could put one word to it, it was refreshing. It was refreshing to have that happen right now when this industry needs that. So,
Agreed. Cheers.
Cheers.